Hi, my name is Ben Plessier and I am a fervent user of Wappler. With this video, I will partially populate the home or index page. I start where I left off in the previous video, with a layout page and a blank index page. Opening the products page, we now see 3 categories and a number of products in each category. Each of the products are live, while only 3 of the products are featured. Now that I have something to play around with, let me start with the index page. Practically every home page has a banner of sorts. For this I add a header. Inside the header come the usuals, a container, a row and a column. I want 2 columns, so I duplicate the first column. Inside the first column, I add an image tag. In the Properties panel, I add the source. In order to mitigate content layout shifts, both width and height of the intrinsic size of the image have to be entered. To find the size of the image, I select the Inspect mode. The values found here are entered into the Properties panel. The Alt attribute is mandatory and holds incredibly useful information for accessibility. Lastly, I make the image responsive so that it will size with the containing element, which in this case is the column. I would like the image to be lowered slightly so that there is a gap between the woman's head and the top of the containing element. For this, I add a top margin to the image. If I now show the layout for a large screen, I see a gap between the image and the second column. I would like the image to be closer. This is done by aligning the image to the right. To add a bit of excitement, I will give the header element one of the new colors available in Bootstrap 5.3. Now for the second column. Here I add a heading. In the Properties panel, I change the size to Display 1 and give it a bold font weight. The header is already left aligned, keeping it close to the image. All I need to do is center the heading vertically. To do this, I select the column and in the Properties panel, Center Align. Now a word about the header. HTML elements are defined by the World Wide Web Consortium, W3C, an international community that develops open standards to ensure the long-term growth of the web. They have defined the header element as follows. The header HTML element represents introductory content, typically a group of introductory or navigational aids. It may contain some heading elements but also a logo, a search form, an author name, and other elements. By default, the HTML's header element has an identical meaning to the banner landmark, unless it is a descendant of a side, article, main, nav, or section, at which point header exposes a generic role, and not the equivalent of the site-wide banner. Because the content pages are all descendants of a main element, the header is no longer classified as a banner. At this stage, in order to comply with ARIA roles, we must give the header a role of banner. To do this, I go to the DOM panel. Under Properties I change the role to banner. The door is now open to start on the next section. This section will display the featured products. With the header still selected, I add a section element after the header. Inside the section come the usuals, a container, row and column. This row is for a heading. I need a second row to display the products, hence I duplicate the first row. Inside the column of the first row, I add a heading. When a heading is inserted, Wappler defaults to an H1. As you know, following proper hierarchy protocol, there may only be one H1 tag per page. This must be followed by an H2 tag, which is then followed by an H3 tag, etc. I therefore change the heading to an H2. But to keep the same size as an H1, I give it a class of H1. I feel that there is not enough space between the header element and the heading that was just created. To rectify this, I select the row and add a top margin. Inside the column of the second row, I add a card. As you know, Bootstrap is a mobile-first framework, meaning that, when a style rule is created in a small screen, it will automatically apply to larger screens, unless it is overridden in a larger screen. I first select the mobile phone screen. Here I see that a one-column layout is perfect. To cement this decision, I select the row. In the Properties panel, I scroll up to Row Columns. I choose to set this to one column. I then select the landscape version of the phone and see that there could easily be two columns. Back in Properties, I select two columns. For the laptop and above, I choose to go for three columns. With the row still selected, in the Properties panel, I scroll up to convert the row to repeat its children. For the expression, I temporarily set it to 3 repeats. When I go to the mobile view, I see that there is not space between the cards. To rectify this, I go back to the Properties panel and scroll down to Spacing. Here I set the Y-gutter to 4. Now for the dynamic part where the cards are populated with the data from the database. First, I retrieve all of the products from the database by adding a data source. The problem now is that I do not want all of the products, I only want to show the featured products, the ones that have featured ticked. To filter the products, I add a data view. The data source is the server connect. The data view is filtered on whether the product is live and featured. Now that we have the filtered data, I can apply this to the cards. I first select the row with the repeat area. In the Properties panel, I change the expression to the data view. While here, I change the ID. We are now ready to populate the cards. Here I select the image of the first card. In the Properties panel, I scroll down to Dynamic Attributes, where I select Images and Image Source. To enter the path to the image, I go to the Site Manager and choose Files. Here I see that the path is Uploads, Images, Products, the product ID and thumbs. Back in the Data Bindings panel, I enter the first part of the path. After which I choose the ID. This becomes a bit fiddly because Wappler tends to remove the /. Never mind, I just replace it. Then comes the thumbs subdirectory followed by the image name. This exposes the images of the featured products. Now for the card title. In the Properties panel, under Dynamic Attributes, I choose Display and Inner Text. The value is the name of the product. The description follows the same sequence, namely, under Dynamic Attributes, Display and Inner Text. The value is the short description. What we see now is a bit of a shambles. The cards are of different heights. To fix this, I select the card and scroll up in the Properties panel. Here I set the height to 100%. Then I select the anchor button and delete it. For the price of the product, as well as an Add to Cart button, I create a footer after the card body. Inside the footer, I add a flex container. The reason for a flex container will become evident as I proceed. Inside the flex container, I add a paragraph. With the paragraph still selected, I scroll down to Dynamic Attributes in the Properties panel. Here I select Display and Inner Text. For the value, I select the price. To show the price's currency, I select the Format button. A word about the price. This is stored in the database as a decimal value. The problem is that, in JavaScript, a decimal value becomes a string. Hence the price needs to be converted into a number. After that, I can format the price's currency. After the price, I add a button and change the text. In the Properties panel, I give the button a style. Now to align the items in the footer. I select the Flex container and in the Properties panel, select Space Between. For the vertical alignment, I choose Baseline. To make the price stand out a bit more, I add a class of FS-4. FS stands for font size. This is what we have created so far. I know that you want to get on with the rest of the project. For this reason, I will not proceed with the page called Shop at this stage. Adding to the cart will be the same as what I will show in the next video. I hope to see you there. Thank you for watching.